I use the iPad in loads of different ways, and on this channel I've shown you how I use it for productivity tasks, for desk setups, for day in the lives, and even for things like gaming. But those videos have never shown off absolutely everything I use it for. They're always very specific. So in this video I wanted to change that. I wanted to show you absolutely everything I use the iPad for to make things on this channel, and just for me as a content creator in general. And I'm just going to talk about the M2 iPad Pro for this video, but bear in mind you can do pretty much all of these tasks on any current iPad. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with how I use the iPad that's kind of away from the desk or not specifically on it. And one of the main things I do here on the channel and in my day-to-day life is to film and take photos, and the iPad is a huge part of that. The first thing I do a lot of is what I'm doing right now, which is filming A-roll, which is talking to camera, and I use the iPad for that hugely. I actually have it standing off to the side just here, just out of eye shot, which has got all of my script or all of my notes on it, so I can scroll on it nice and easily. Okay, so this is what it looks like from the other side of the camera. That's what I'm normally looking at. And then just over here to the right, I have the iPad on this mag float stand, which I've been a huge fan of, and that's got all of my notes or all of my bullet points or my script on it, which is really useful. It means I can quickly glance from here down to there, and usually people don't notice, or I'll do it with I'll cover it with a bit of B-roll or something. Talking of filming, another huge thing I do here is get B-roll in the office, and B-roll is all the product shots you see, and the iPad plays a huge role in that. Once I've done filming this A-roll shot, which is what you're watching right now, I actually sit down, edit it all, and while I'm editing it, I'll get good notes out and I'll use my Apple Pencil to make a huge list of all the B-roll I need to make that video happen. So that will be shots that I need that show off something very specific, or there'll be pickup shots that I know I'll need to grab. I always make a list on good notes, and I always handwrite it out because handwriting just kind of makes me memorize things a lot better. So that's one of the first things I'll do before moving to B-roll. While I'm filming the B-roll as well, I'll use the iPad to cross things off the list, or I'll also use it to reference other shots that I really like. So I'll load up some YouTube videos which I think are really well filmed or something like that, and I'll try and emulate those shots within what I'm doing. Another thing the iPad's really useful for is I have an electronic slider which gets me this really nice panning shots, and that's controlled via an app, and I'll use the iPad for that. I really like using the iPad when I'm shooting B-roll and when I'm all over the place because it doesn't really get in the way. I can put it on the side, or I can put it back in its keyboard case, or I can just hold it under my arm while I get some shots or something like that. And it just kind of follows me around and adapts to my usage, which I find really helpful. And especially when I'm filming B-roll in here and it's only me, I don't have anyone else to help. The versatility of it means it just doesn't get in the way like a MacBook or something else does. Lastly, one of the things that I really love using the iPad for is sketching out thumbnails, which are just so important. So whenever I'm filming A-roll or B-roll, I'll always be thinking of what a thumbnail might look like and how it might show best what's going off in the video. And I usually use Procreate or just Good Notes to sketch out these ideas, because going into a thumbnail session without an idea of what photo you're trying to get is really tricky, but having some sketches to go from just makes the whole process easier. So I always do that too. All of this iPad use also translates into short form content as well. So if you've seen any of my Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts or the odd TikTok or something, I'll use the iPad in a very similar way when I'm getting the B-roll shots or the A-roll shots. It really is kind of my companion for all of that. Which reminds me, if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure you do. It's @BiteReview, and you'll see all of the nice kind of reels that I make, and I try and keep them nice and aesthetic too. So make sure you do check those out. If I do end up going away from the office as well, I generally keep my iPad usage relatively light. If it's going to be a heavier day, I'll take the MacBook with me. But if I do take the iPad with me, then I keep things very kind of research based. And I actually made a video on how I use my iPad on a day in the life sort of thing. So if you want to see that, I'll pop it up here so you can check it out. But yeah, I mostly keep my iPad to research-based stuff. So a lot of the time, if I'm out of the office, I'll be planning the next videos. So I use something like Notion to do that, which has got absolutely, my brain on YouTube is all plugged into Notion, so I can scroll through there and think about what I want to make. I'll type up scripts if I'm going to use a script into Google Docs. I was trying to use Notion for that as well, but I found the interface really tricky to kind of get used to, but I know they're bringing Notion AI soon, so I might jump back to it. And I do a lot of Instagram scrolling on there as well, and the app for Instagram on iPad is still terrible. But with Stage Manager, you can have it in a kind of floating window, which is quite nice. And I also do a lot of browsing on Pinterest too, and on YouTube. I find being a good content creator often comes out from watching lots of other content too, and that's one of my hobbies. So I generally watch a huge amount or consume a huge amount of content on the iPad too, and that also falls into this research-based area. The only strenuous thing I do on the iPad when I'm away from the office is edit photos, and I use Lightroom for this, which is one of my absolute favorite uses for the iPad. Interacting with photos in this touch-based system just clicks with me, and I absolutely love it. So any photo you see from me will kind of like 80% of the time is going to be edited on my iPad, and I'll have posted it on Instagram through my iPad too, or I'll airdrop it to my phone and think about it later and post it there. But yeah, I absolutely love Lightroom, and I use the Apple Pencil a lot for that, for a bit of finer control, but I think it's just absolutely excellent. While I'm working on the iPad like this, I'll always have Stage Manager active too, especially on this larger M2 12.9-inch iPad. It actually is a really decent experience. I don't really like Stage Manager too much on the smaller iPads, but on this bigger one, which is almost the size of a laptop anyway, the multi-windowed user interface just works really well for it. So I'll usually have the internet open along with my to-do list, or I'll have Lightroom open along with, YouTube on the side or something like that, or Spotify, so I can listen to some music while I edit my photos. And another thing that I make use of a lot is my different home screen setups. I've got a shortcut on my home screen which jumps me into like a productivity work mode or a gaming mode, or just takes me back home, or sets up something really simple like a lo-fi kind of button which just takes me straight to where I want to be in terms of music. That's really helpful as well because it kind of silences all my distractions, and it means if I am working at somewhere like a coffee shop or someone else's house, I can just kind of get straight into work without having to really think about what apps I need to access and stuff. I do have a small guide on how I have all of my home screen stuff set up, so I'll link that below too. If I am working away from a Wi-Fi connection as well, I'll actually just tether to my phone. So if I'm in a coffee shop, I never really trust their Wi-Fi, or if I'm sitting outside somewhere, or just, on a train or something like that, I'll tether to my phone immediately. It feels a bit more secure, and even though the iPad I have does have the cellular, I just never use it. I don't really need an extra monthly payment if my phone can already do that really well. And pairing with the iPad with the iPhone for tethering for internet is so quick and so simple, it's almost feels criminal to not use that, so I just use that too. So while I'm away from the desk or the office, I actually use the iPad a huge amount, and I really, really love it. But when it comes back into the office, which is where I'm generally doing a lot more kind of heavy based work, which is mainly video editing, I don't use it that much. I don't want to sugarcoat my iPad usage, because when I'm sitting here at this desk, I'm going to be using the Mac Studio for kind of like 90 to 95% of the time. But one of the things that I do love using the iPad for, and again I've got a video on this, is universal control. When the iPad's in this stand, which is what I have just to the left of my monitor, it means I can just drag my mouse straight over to it, and my keyboard and mouse will connect automatically to the iPad, and I can use it there if I need to. Generally speaking, I have my to-do list on here, or some lo-fi on here, or all of my video notes on here, or things that I need to kind of just get done, and I use it very much as kind of like a smart reference monitor. But it can be a lot more useful. You can browse TikTok on there, you can use Instagram on there, you can do proper posting things and use proper iPad apps side by side with the Mac, which I found really, really useful. I don't use it all the time, but when I do, I just find it's an absolute productivity boost, and I do really love having it there. With that Mac Studio 2, it's very rare that I would connect my iPad to my monitor to have a complete iPad setup, even though I do really enjoy that setup and I've used it before. It just doesn't really compare to the Mac Studio when it comes to video editing, and I hope that will change in the future. It'd be really nice just to have an iPad and be able to plug it in and get a full desktop kind of thing. But even with Stage Manager, even with all the advancements we've seen recently, the past few years of iPad, it's still not quite there yet. And for me, I think you should use the best tool for the job. And at the moment, that's still the Mac for video editing. So that rounds up pretty much how I use the iPad to get general work done, how I get stuff sorted on this channel, how I get things posted on Instagram, and how I get all of my ideas into one place, and then to bring them to life here in the office or when I'm away from the office. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any tips on how I could use the iPad better, or if you're using any specific apps which you think might be really useful for me, then let me know in the comments below. I always love to hear what you have to say. And as always, I will see you all in the next one.